Grab your favorite alcoholic or non-alcoholic beverage. Do not drink and drive, and drink responsibly. And join us for this episode of Why Complain When You Can Whine. Welcome to Why Complain When You Can Whine, making sense of the senseless. Join us as we attempt to make sense of toxic nonsense while drinking wine. Although today I'm going to show you what I'm drinking and it's not wine, but I am Dr. Jody Larman, licensed clinical psychologist in the state of California, and therefore anything that we discuss on this podcast is purely for psychoeducational or entertainment purposes only. Okay, so what I am drinking, it is Hanukkah. So I have to show you my Hanukkah shirt that I was given.
Oh, I love that.
I was given this by an old supervisor that I had in the last job before my internship. So like the late 90s. And I never wore it because it's like really, really nice and silkscreen, or I don't know, it's painted on there. I don't know. But I wore it last year and I'm like, I need to start wearing this thing. And my glass is Mickey heads and dreidels for Hanukkah.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
It's my Disney glass. And what I'm drinking is coffee, iced coffee with Bailey's chocolate made with real Belgian chocolate.
Ooh, yummy. Well, I'm drinking coffee. There is definitely that.
Well,
but I'm missing the alcohol.
You can at least say it's spiked. No.
Well, I should say it's spiked. I can't lie, but it's not spiked because, as you can hear, folks, I've a bit congested. I don't normally sound this low in my tone.
Men find that sexy. Whenever my voice gets like that, or I sound like a man, they're like, "No, it's sexy."
I sound like a guy. I know. So, anyways, thank you, Jody, for having me on.
My co-host
I am Brianne Burry from Canada.
You sure you don't have anything in your coffee?
Yeah, no, right? I know, no, it's just the lack of sleep and the somewhat congested. I live in North Vancouver. I'm in BC, Canada, and I am a licensed registered trauma therapist.
And the living in Canada part, you guys, please take notice. I know that I found out we got our end of the year like stats from Spotify, and we have United Kingdom is our, I think, second biggest following besides United States, and then all over we have follower or subscribers, whatever you want to call it, all over the place on Spotify. So I imagine on YouTube as well. And this is going to come in to play in our podcast today. That she lives in Canada and I live in the United States. We're going to hear the difference. So today I went, and if you can see, I got my hair cut today. And we were talking about, my hairdresser and I were talking about, not very far from where she lives, kind of right around the corner, there was home invasion, and the homeowner shot and killed one of the suspects. And I guess the other one ran off and they found blood, so they got his DNA. And we were talking about it. And so we were talking about guns. And she said to me, well, you know, it's all this mental illness around. And I took a deep breath and I said, okay, for one, it's not mental illness. Statistically speaking, and I honestly don't have the statistics in front of me, but you can Google this. Statistically speaking, people with mental illness are typically the victims, not the perpetrators of gun violence. And when they are the perpetrators, more often than not, it's against themselves, like in a suicide, or against somebody that is known to them. It's not typically them going out and just shooting up someplace, because that is hate. And hate is not a mental illness. And when Bree and I were discussing this, one glaring thing came out, and that is, this is America.
Yeah, there's a very big difference between our countries, even though we're neighbors. And And that's just some of our politics and our laws. But as I feel like this podcast in particular needs a little bit of recognition in regards to Dr. Jody Larman, because she is Jewish. And with what is going on in the world today, we've formulated this podcast on hate and the impact it still has on our world today, and how we as a human race are not getting it. And that it's also Hanukkah. So I think we should honor Dr. Lerman and her, yes, and her, and how heavy this may be weighing on the Jewish community, and that, you know, as the human race, we need to respect and honor how this is impacting the Jewish community. So I find that this podcast is really prevalent with what's going on in the world today, and it needs to be recognized. And to all of you that are going to be watching, you know, just send a heart to the Jewish community and to Dr. Larman and to anybody who is suffering and witnessing and experiencing the current world right now and the hate, because we're going back in time. We're not going forwards, we're going back. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And just to, as what Dr. Larman was just saying in regards to kind of a good interlude into the podcast in regards to hate and gun violence in Canada, and many of you will already know this, we don't have the gun violence that the US does. In fact, every other country around the world doesn't have the gun violence. And this is not to discriminate against my US friends at all. It actually terrifies me and hurts my heart more than anything, the fear that you are born into and that you live in every day. I don't send my kids to school in fear that they're going to be shot, because we just don't have guns. And it has nothing to do with population, and it has nothing to do with mental health. Okay, mental health is a universal problem. The US remains the only country in the world that has the gun violence, okay, versus anywhere else in the world, and due to the lack of gun laws. So I've heard every argument under the sun, because it's something that really triggers me, as it's frustrating, right? When people don't need to be dying that way. So anyways, I'll leave that alone, because that's a huge debate. And I know there's going to be a lot of people that disagree with me on that. And that's
There's
fine.
going to be a lot of people that are right now probably screaming at us for both. Well, what about? What about?
I know.
What about?
Yeah.
And I'm
doesn't matter.
If you want to give your whataboutisms in the comments or whatever, it doesn't matter, because no matter what topic you talk about, there's going to be a what about. But if the majority of people agree with that topic, you're not really going to hear the what abouts. But this is such a divisive topic that right away, what about? So I don't know, and I hope I'm wrong. I really truly hope I'm wrong. But I can hear people right now, when you say Israel, going, but what about? And it's like, it's called being kind to everybody. Because I've seen that when people do what about, they're typically assholes in their whatabouts. You know, they're not like, hey, let's have a nice dialogue. It's a what about full of hate.
And what perpetuates hate? So hate, as we've just defined, is not a mental illness. It's a taught behavior. It's learned. Hate is learned.
Absolutely learned.
But it's also, what is the underlying emotion behind hate, Jody?
Fear.
Exactly. Fear. It's ignorance and it's fear. That's what perpetuates hate, is the unknown or the ignorance of other people. And with what's going on in the world right now, I mean, it's like we've gone back to 1935 or whatever it was, when Hitler decided to overthrow all of Europe and discriminate against the Jewish folk, all due to the fact that they had more money and Germany was in dire straits and poor. And it was all about attacking a certain, group of people, whether it's due to religious differences or ethnic differences, whatever, it doesn't matter. And there's also very much an epigenetic component to all of this. Anybody that's experienced discrimination, hate, racial discrimination, whatever it may be, religious discrimination, faith discrimination, when you've been through the trauma such as the Holocaust and what the Jewish people have been through, it's like they're just being re-traumatized again. You're predisposed to trauma, Jody, just based on your lineage.
I know when I did a video on this last year, when I was 6, I think around 6, I was like first grade or so. And people might say, you're lying, you don't remember this, but these things stand out. We have what's called flashbulb memories, and memories that are traumatic or surprising, or like when 9/11, we all remember it. Or not we all. I'm sorry, I don't like to use absolutes. But when I was 6 years old, I had a friend, and she comes up to me, and I was wearing a little Jewish star, and she takes my necklace and holds it, and she goes, I can't be friends with you. I'm like, why? And she goes, you guys killed Jesus. And I was like, what? I have no clue. You know, I'm this little girl. And I'm like, no, we didn't. And she didn't speak to me again. And when I was in my 20s, I was dating somebody who, there was like 4 of us, and we would all hang out, and we were at my work, we had a football pool, and the guy I was dating was in it, and he lost the football pool. And he asked me, I'm on the phone with him, and he said, who won? And I said, my sister did. And he said, fucking Jews. And I hung up the phone. And that was it. I never spoke with him again, because I'm like, it's a football pool. And where does religion come into this? And you knew I was Jewish. And it's like, these things, like, people might be listening going, that's nothing. But those are called microaggressions. And that's
not even micro. It's not that's not micro.
Aggression.
That's an aggression.
Aggression.
Yeah.
But little things like my narcissistic ex was at my house for Passover, and I made Seder food, Jewish food, matzo ball soup and stuff. And the following year, this was right before we broke up, he goes, are you having Passover again? I said, yeah. And he goes, oh, are you going to have that horrible food, that bland food, that awful food again? I'm like, I'm sorry, you loved it that day. And he's like, I'm like, so you're saying my culture's food? Because it wasn't my cooking.
No,
it was my culture's food. And I was like, wow. Like, that's a microaggression.
That is. Yeah. It's discriminating against a unique group of people. It's not about your cooking. Like you said, it's an attack on the Jewish culture.
So all those little things, and anybody of any race, ethnicity, anything, sexual orientation, when you have those little microaggressions that seemingly harmless, like, shake it off, you can only shake it off for so long.
Yeah.
Where, you know, I at this point in history, in today's day and age, it's not about, with politics, if someone doesn't agree with my politics, my political beliefs, it's easy to just kind of go, okay, whatever. But and if I hear someone start to say something, I'm just like, we don't agree on this. But now when I hear someone say anything about, well, you know, what's happening in Israel, I start to get like, oh no. Is this somebody that, what are they going to say? Because if they start to say anything about from the river to the sea, which means we're going to eliminate all Jews, and it's not just the Jews, by the way, because they want to come here and do the same thing to Christians, just so everybody knows. But it's like, okay, even if you don't know I'm Jewish, I tense up.
Well, of course you do. You're having a visceral reaction to hate,
yeah,
and not knowing what's going to be spewed at you. And like I said, there's a genetic component or an epigenetic, a historical component to this because of what you've already been through. This is what makes it so sad. And the type of hate, we have different types of hate all over the world. And it was interesting because Jody and I were talking, maybe it was a few weeks ago now, when we decided to do this podcast, because she was seeing a few things on the news that were happening in Canada. And one was a woman who was running a department out of the University of Alberta for sexual assault. It was the sexual assault department. And she signed a letter And Jody can describe the letter to you and what that meant, but she was fired right away after that. And I had to see the irony behind it, because for those of you watching that don't know much about Canada and the politics here, but Alberta sort of stands alone, right? And not to say that I dislike people from Alberta, but if you want to look at right and left, they are hardcore right. We call Alberta the Texas of Canada because everybody's there is hardcore right. And so they're all conspiracy theorists. They're all whatever. They're all so beyond that it didn't really surprise me that she came from Alberta, but it was so disgusting. So Jody, you can go on and explain what that letter was about.
Basically, let me just add that today, for the first time, the UN has admitted that there were sexual atrocities that went on.
Good.
So
Thank you. That's good. At least,
yeah.
Okay, excellent. So you've got
goes
validation. We've got proof. Okay.
Yeah. This goes along with that, with the whole believe all women unless they're Jewish women. And a lot of these women are no longer here. They cannot speak for themselves because they not only raped them, but they then murdered them. So it goes based on evidence, or they're still hostages. So because there's no actual, there is actual proof. So when I say this,
of course
I
there is
facetiously, but because there's no actual proof and no person or people, and it goes against what Hamas is saying that they do. She was basically saying, if I'm not mistaken, that it did not happen. This did not happen.
She signed a letter verifying that there was no proof of it happening, and that it never happened. So it was directly, obviously, taking one side versus another. And she's a public figure, and she signed this letter stating that she didn't believe that any Jewish women were raped or affected in any way, shape, or form sexually. And
not only is she a public figure, she ran the institute.
Yeah, she ran to the Institute for Sexual Assault. So pretty disgusting, pretty horrifying. But she was fired right after that. And then there was another, I think you saw it on TikTok, but somebody saying that, there was a video clip of a young boy who's maybe 10, who is spewing Islamic hate, and dressed in all the garb and all the thing, and Jody had said, like, oh God, Canada, like I didn't think. And it's interesting
that happened in Canada
because it's so sad, because if you actually know, going in every country, there's hate everywhere. Hate doesn't have boundaries. So it's sad because his parents clearly came right out of Islam. If he's spewing and born in Canada, that is not a representation of patriotism to a country. It is religious radical hate. And when we talk about radicalism, this is where we see the extremities. If you look at Hitler, if you look at the Bosnia and the Croatian and the Serbian War in the early 90s, if you look at, you can go back in history. I mean, it has never ended. But the radicalism when it comes to religion is off the charts. Then you come to the US and you've got Black slavery, and you've got the Deep South and the Confederation and the Ku Klux Klan and the KKK. And this is radical hate. Right?
And, okay, I do want to say, we are not talking about, because I know, again, that there are going to be people going, what about all the babies then the women that the Israelis raped? Okay, first off, there has been absolutely zero proof that the IDF or any Israeli has raped any Palestinian. Literally, there's been zero proof, and there's been no one claiming it over there. Here in the US, there were people who are saying, well, what about all of that? Now, another thing is, we are not talking about individual people. As far as I don't hate the Palestinian people. It's Hamas and the radical supporters of Hamas. And if people say it doesn't matter, they, as a matter of fact, found out that one of the UN RWA, I think it is, or UNRWA staff is a teacher and was holding one of the hostage boys in an attic in the dark this whole time. Another one was a Palestinian doctor that held another hostage this whole time. So it's the complicit Palestinians that and Hamas that I am talking about, not the people that don't want Hamas, not the Palestinian as a whole. And that's the thing. People are looking at the Jewish people as a whole. And that's where hate comes too. It's like, I can dislike you. If I don't like you, it's because you have done something to me or my family or people I care about. But that I don't hate just for the sake of hating. Like, I don't hate the Palestinian people, but Palestinian and pro-Palestinian people hate the Jews. So again, where does hate come from? If you look on YouTube and go way back on YouTube, way back, and I can tell you from 2016, but before that, there are videos of classrooms in Palestine teaching. They were videotaping their teachings, and it was all about hate, 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 hate. They were teaching hate again and again and again. So, and the one school that there was a school in Palestine that they posted, it's a UN school, and they posted a jihadian slogan, or they were chanting a jihad slogan. And it turns out that that school graduated verified 100 Hamas members, at least. They verified 100. So I don't know. Do you think it's just a coincidence that one school who's chanting about hate and graduated 100 of those people that hate, that are radical, were they born that way and they all came there and then they left there the same? Or did that hate, did they what is it, nurture that hate, build that hate, grow
Well,
that
that's exactly
hate,
what they're
foster
doing.
that hate? Yeah.
It's control. It's all about control and spreading hate and beliefs and radicalism, and in any form has always created major problems within humanity across the globe. But what's sort of disturbing now is we're seeing it, just history repeating itself, but in a very different era with multiple avenues of media. So how is it affecting the globe, the world, people's perspectives? And now, like, again, when you go down the rabbit hole with conspiracy theories, like all of this shit, if you look at the movie, and I was telling Jody this the other day, I was like, watch the movie Don't Look Up with Leonardo DiCaprio and Jennifer Lawrence, because that is exactly what COVID was all about, right? And it's like all the proof is there, but yet everybody's got so many different theories because there's so many different media avenues now that there's so much cognitive dissonance in our society. Nobody knows what to believe. Most people sit back and go, I actually have no idea.
Explain what cognitive dissonance is. Because
Okay,
people might be going, well, what is that? I hear it all the time.
Often people that come out of abusive relationships suffer cognitive dissonance if they've been gaslit enough. So if you look at gaslighting, which is a manipulative tactic of denying someone their reality, that's what cognitive dissonance is, where people kind of go, I don't know what I'm believing. I don't know what to believe because I've been brainwashed, or I've been told this for so long, or now I'm being told this, and now I'm being told this, and they aren't able to grasp their own reality. So as a whole, Jody, do you want to add to that?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, just like people who are claiming how much they hate the US and, oh my God, what is happening in the Middle East or anywhere is horrible, but they're also behind their keyboard, not doing anything and living their wealthy, if you will, lifestyle for some of them. Like, oh my God, the poor oppressed people. We need to march and rally, and then we drive home in our brand new car to our really nice house and forget it ever happened until we want to remember it again, and then go out there and again or get behind our keyboard and talk about all. There are, I can't tell you how many that I've seen videos of people who knew absolutely nothing on October 7th. But now they're experts on October 8th because they got all their information from social media for the most part. But also saying, you know, it is so hard. It's an open air prison. It's terrible. These people have it really bad, as you're in your air conditioned or central heating, eating your food, complaining about how bad other people have. It's so horrible. It's like, it's not horrible for you. Stop saying it is. You're sitting here feeding on the wealth of what you're complaining about, then leave. How many people have you seen protesting, tearing up American flags? See, that's another thing. They get out there, they tear up the American flag, they burn the American flag, they replace the American flag with the Palestinian flag, and then they go home to their home in America and go about their day. So they're gaslighting themselves.
Yeah, and being hypocritical for sure. It's somewhat ridiculous. But again, driving home the point that go back in history, when there wasn't so many avenues of social media, there's just pretty much one, right? And society was a little bit more conformed, and there wasn't just so many belief systems out there. And now we've got this, but what's really sad is us as a human race are not learning anything from history and the hatred and the crime and the trauma and the horrible things that have happened. It's just repeating itself. And it comes down to one powerful person who is grown up on hate and has such an influence over people. And like Jody said, teaching hate. Have we not learned as a society? Did people not watch Oprah back in the 80s? Like, I'm sorry, but it's true. And then you're still seeing all this white supremacy. I'm just going to give a quick example of what my daughter went through 2 weeks ago, and severe bullying and kids at the age of 12, and the kind of bullying, but in this stream that was directed towards her. Not only was there tons of go kill yourself, suicidal ideation, and I'm supporting this, or I'll go back, get back in the kitchen, or I'll rape you. These are 12 and 13-year-old boys. So the misogyny and the sexual connotation, they can't even comprehend really what they're saying. But what was really disturbing out of all of that was one boy in particular who was slurring Hitler quotes in German, all because of what's happening in the world right now. It's bringing up, again, groups that are in support of Hitler. Like, how? And that he was spewing this, and he didn't even know what he was saying. His parents were absolutely mortified. Where is he getting this information? TikTok, social media.
Yeah. I mean, it used to come from parents. It still does come from parents,
yeah,
but it comes a lot from social media now.
Yeah. Well, the quotes were of Hitler. There was quotes that Hitler was saying, and he was speaking in German. And one kid's like, "What does this mean?" And it means, "Oh, we've upset the Jew." And my daughter, and we're not Jewish. Like, these kids are just, it's again grasping onto these almost more for shock value, but they don't comprehend the gravity of what they're saying. It is the worst hate crime in all of history. And yet it's all happening again. No, go ahead.
Let me read cognitive dissonance theory, because that way I can then, it makes more sense than when two actions or ideas are not psychologically consistent with each other, people do all in their power to change them until they become consistent. The discomfort is triggered by the person's belief clashing with the new information that's perceived, and wherein the individual tries to find a way to resolve the contradiction to reduce the discomfort. So
exactly.
If I believed this, but now everybody, it's trendy, if you will, is saying this, how do I then?
It's ambiguous. It's an inner conflict. You've got one opposing fact or information conflicting with another, and you're trying to find a middle ground.
And it's almost like the do as I say, not as I do. It's
100%.
like, wait a minute. You're saying, and again, going back to, you guys are saying, we got to fight, we got to march, we got to whatever, as you're sitting behind your little keyboard, and it doesn't affect your life. You're do as I say, but not as I do. Why are you not doing it? That's the thing of why are you not over there then? Why are you not participating in the fighting? I'm not saying that they should, but people, it's like right now, I'm sorry, I have to remember this because it was really good. They were talking about how people are siding with Palestine. That's fine, but because they're oppressed. So they're saying, these poor oppressed people, and they're buying the kifa. And the funny thing is they're buying the Saudi Arabia kifa, not the Palestine kifa, and they don't even know that there's a difference. That's how bad it is. But they're getting the kifa, and then they're saying they want to become Muslim. So they're going to become Muslim. And so what's happening, I guess this is the way, and I'm really sorry, guys, I'm trying to remember this, is she was saying that they're becoming, without actually being oppressed, without actually knowing what is oppression. They're not oppressed, but they're saying, I stand with you. Look, it's more cultural appropriation, if you want to talk about it like that.
100%.
Because they're not in the culture. They want to be Muslim without going through all the Muslim stuff. Women are like, yes, I'm going to wear the kifa. It's like, but if you're going to be there, you have to wear the burqa. Oh no, I'm not going to do that. I am with you in spirit, but I'm not with you for real, because I don't want to do the dirty work, but I'm going to say I'm one with you. Is basically what she was saying. She said they want to be, I am the oppressed as well. I'm here with you. Oh, wait, hold on. I got to have some my drink and my expensive Baileys, but I'm here with you as an oppressed.
Right.
It's like, because it's trendy. And there's going to be people that are really pissed off by what I'm saying right now. And I would be happy to have a civil discourse. If you want to come, we could do a podcast if somebody wants to have a civil discourse. I would be open to that. It would take a lot of back and forth to make sure you're really going to have a civil discourse, though, because I've seen these things. As soon as people are like, I can be civil, you fucking bitch. Okay, that's not civil.
No.
Right there, that's not civil.
No.
So, that's the thing, is people, it's really hard to have civil discourse these days.
But it's also people with good intentions, but complicating matters. Because again, when you're trying to identify with somebody else's trauma that you have no experience with, it would be like, for example, okay, so I'm Canadian and I grew up on the West Coast, and I literally grew up on the border of a Aboriginal First Nations reserve. And it would be me being white privileged Caucasian trying to be a First Nations trauma therapist.
Or dressing up as them.
Yeah.
Saying, I am now officially
one of you.
One of you.
You just can't do that. There's boundaries. Okay. There's lines. And I mean, with all good intention, to be able to try to empathize with someone's pain, it could backfire in a sense that you just can't. You just cannot really comprehend, because you didn't go through it. You're not genetically predisposed. You're not of that ethnicity. You're not of that faith. You're not of, again, it's getting complicated. I think as a human race, it's not a hard thing to do to just simply not hate.
When my son was in the YMCA, and we're talking, he was in the YMCA from preschool for 2 years and then all the way through 5th grade. And I remember we would walk in there. I met a lot of friends. We were YMCA moms in the committee and all of that. And you'd walk in, and there was, my son's developmentally delayed. So there was people with developmental disabilities, people with physical disabilities, people of all shapes, sizes, colors, whatever, all playing together. And I distinctly remember walking in one day and thinking, when does this change?
Right.
When do people start to notice all of the differences in a negative way? Because it happens. We all see that it happens. And not only that is why, because the same parents are going to be picking up these kids and seeing the same thing that I am. And at what point do they kind of say,
Mhm.
don't play with that one.
Mhm.
Don't play with that one.
Mhm.
And it's usually that one because they can't
Mhm.
then individualize and humanize.
But this is generational hate, right? We should know as modern day society that this is not acceptable. We know better. We've known better for many, many, many years. And we've taught and we've done a really, I feel, for the most part, an okay job within the curriculums, within education in schools, not to pass down this generational hate. If I even go back to my dad's generation, my parents' generation, and I'm in my early 40s, and my grandparents' generation, I mean, that racism was there. It's just the way everybody spoke. Does my dad really hate people or a group of people? No, but it's the talk. It's we know better than that, though. We've been educated. It's not to say that this is all based on pure ignorance. We know the impact it has on people. We know the impact of hate. We've known it for a very long time. So why is it still happening?
And it's honestly, like you said, it's going backwards and it's getting worse.
Yeah, it is.
And
it really
the reason why it's even worse than it was before is because, like you said, we know better.
We do.
What is it? History never repeats. That's bullshit.
Bullshit.
Because
It's
unless
bullshit.
you learn from history, it's going to repeat.
It's no different than somebody saying they're sorry. What does sorry really mean? It means change. It means you've learned from the mistake you've made and you're not going to repeat it. How many times, especially with this podcast in particular, and Jody and I both working in fields of various different mental health areas, but abuse and narcissistic abuse and whatever, they're classic for, oh, sorry, it falls on deaf ears. It happens over and over and over again. So this is exactly the same thing. History is repeating itself, even though everybody, and I mean everybody, knows hate and knows that it's wrong. They know that it's wrong, no matter that you're being brainwashed, that you're part of a faith, that you're being taught hate, and innately we know better as a society and in modern day age that that's not acceptable or okay.
Like in New York, I think it's a public defender. I can't remember her name, but she was tearing down the hostage pictures. She lost her job because she was being filmed doing it, but she's a public defender for the city of New York. I don't know exactly where, but the state of New York. And it's like, okay, you're a public defender. You're not even a criminal attorney, but you're a public defender. And you're tearing down pictures of hostages. Now, and then there's people that are like, well, what about the Palestinians? Tearing down a picture of hostages does not help anyone if you're trying to help someone. And caring about Israeli babies does not negate caring about Palestinian babies.
No, it doesn't.
And that's what a lot of people now are like, yes, but if I approve of this, then I have to approve of that. Or if I negate this, then I have to negate that. It's like,
it's like black and white thinking. That's like splitting. Like, why that? What's the need? There isn't.
You know, okay, let's say that you want to get upset at soldiers. Fine. They're people too, but they're in the Army, Navy, whatever. Are you upset with the US soldiers? No, you're upset with the military in general. But if your child or your neighbor's child went off to the military, do you suddenly hate them?
Yeah.
So how can you hate these people? You don't know them.
No.
But you hate them because they are against the side that you're for. And why are you for that side? Because they're oppressed, and that's what we do. And it's like, this is something that really, it's like when when a Black person says that was racist and you say, no, it wasn't. I cannot tell you how many times people have said that wasn't anti-Semitic. You can't tell a Jewish person what is or isn't anti-Semitic, just like you cannot tell a Black person what is or isn't racist, or an Asian person what is or isn't Asian hate. You can't.
No, you can't. Not even a little bit. And that's what I'm saying. It's white privilege.
It is happening so much now, more than ever before. And it's like, you read Wikipedia. I've had people tell me that's where they got their info, is Wikipedia. And I've grown up being taught not hate, But I went to Hebrew school and religious school as a little girl, all the way up to my bat mitzvah. And now I'm not a religious Jew, I'm spiritual, but I do belong to a conservative temple. It goes Reform, Conservative, Orthodox, and then there's Hasidic,
Right.
and all the different sects, but or denominations or whatever they're called. See, I don't even know what it's called, denomination or sect.
Denominations, yeah, sectors, denominations, whatever, yeah.
But I grew up learning all about hate. I took a history of anti-Semitism class at UCLA for my it was off. It was supposed to be the history of the Third Reich, and they changed it to history of anti-Semitism. And the reader that we had, I still have it because it was great, was this thick. And I graduated in 92, so it's gotten thicker, I'm sure. But it goes back to the beginning. I mean, there were things that I didn't even know. And yet there are so many people saying to Jewish people that you do not know. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us have been taught and told throughout our history about we've everything is like, get rid of the Jews, get rid of the Jews. Hanukkah was supposed to be getting rid of the Jews, but the Maccabees were able to light the oil, and it supposedly lasted 8 nights. But it was all about getting rid of the Jews. The Inquisition, the Crusades. You look at everything in history, and it's getting rid of the Jews. So then when people today are telling us that we are the oppressors.
But this is the interesting part about the human condition and the fact, that the Zoom's giving me the hand up. When you look at faith and religion in particular, and you look at the human condition where people have no ability to see anything outside of what they believe, this is very limited thinking. I mean, both of us as therapists, you have to be able to see all sides of almost everything, right? There's always, I was actually just listening to Dr. Marsha Linehan's memoir. It's an amazing book. And she's the one that came up with the DBT. For those of you that don't know, that's dialectical behavioral therapy for people who have major mood dysregulation, right? And it's used for a lot.
For borderline.
She started for borderline personality disorder. Actually, she started it for just suicidality and self-harm. And then it turned into borderline because in order for her to create and get the research funding to actually come up with a module of therapy, it had to be for a specific like diagnosable disorder. So suicidality wasn't a diagnosable condition, right? So, or self-harm. So it had to be BPD, but it was originally created to really help those who have severe emotional dysregulation about suicidality and self-harm. She, listening to her memoir and her talking about how strong she is of her opinion and her will to speak, and that she's got a motor mouth and she's very opinionated, things started to change when she realized that, oh, maybe I have to start listening to the perspective of other people. My opinion isn't only the right opinion. Most people aren't self-aware enough to really grasp this. But again, she became a therapist back in the 60s and a doctor back in the 60s and 70s. So, I mean, she's been around for quite a while. But she even said having the ability to be objective to another's perspective can also help with emotional regulation because she's not so fired up that her opinion's not right. So the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when you look at the way that we think as human beings, our way isn't always the right way. And you can have your belief system, but so can other people. And just because you believe something differently than other people does not make them right or wrong. This is what we call dichotomous thinking. It's black or white. It is not the way the world works. We work in gray. But if you have no ability to be like right or wrong, yes or right, blah, 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 you're going to suffer. And you're going to keep this very limited thinking throughout your life. And this is what continues to perpetuate hate. Because the fear behind hate is what drives hate. It's the unknown. And my way is the right way because it keeps me safe.
Yeah.
That's not the reason. Like that's the reason behind it, but that's not the answer. So again, when it comes to faith, this is where radicalism comes into play. I don't have a specific denomination. I was technically born into like an Anglican Christian family, but my parents didn't practice religion or Christianity. I have my own spirituality, my own thoughts. I do believe in God, but I'm not somebody that is like specifically belonging to a certain denomination. And it drives me absolutely batshit crazy when people say what you believe is wrong. According to who? Because religion, when you think about it, if you go to the theology behind it and you go to the philosophical thinking of the way that humans are, we have to have a story. We have to have something to believe in. Otherwise, it's too scary. This is where the Bible and it also created social construct, because back in biblical times, there was no government. The Bible is what drove everybody to follow the rules. So whatever faith you belong to, right? It was creating construct so that people could operate in calm and collected and organized manner, and not just abrupt chaos.
You know, it's funny, my way is the only way. I remember, as this just popped in my head. I had a friend when my husband passed away. I had a coworker. And I hadn't talked to him. We talked, but I hadn't worked with him in a couple of years. And I remember he became born again. And when he became born again, he started telling me things like, well, you don't believe in the 10 Commandments. And I'm like, dude, what do you think the Bible that you list, the Old Testament, is our Bible? I used to have a 10 Commandments bracelet that I wore every day as a kid.
Yeah.
You're telling me I don't know? And he's like, well, tell me what they are. And I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah. See, people just don't know
them off the top of my head. Thou shalt not kill, commit adultery, covet thy neighbor's wife, whatever. And then he said, we were talking and he said, my husband was not Jewish. My husband was going to convert, but I'm like, I was being Jewish. I can say this. And I said, it costs money. Don't. Why do you need to spend money on that? We had a Jewish wedding. We celebrated the holidays. He had a Jewish funeral. So I'm like, why do you need to spend money to officially be? But this coworker said to me, you know, I said, my hope is that we will be together in the very far future. And he said, oh no, you and your husband will not be together because you don't believe in the right thing. So you're going to go someplace different because you don't.
I can't.
Right thing. And I was just like, we're done. We're done.
Again, it's that limited thinking and being like, your way is the right way and the highway. And what causes all conflict is when you think like that. It doesn't matter what it's in, whether you're the CEO of a company, whether you're this. I mean, there's science proving different things, and there's always that 2% that's left for argument, because if you look at being a scientist, that's what science is. There's always room for debate, even if it's just 2%.
That's why there's a P equals.
Exactly.
Like never 100%.
But it's that dichotomous thinking that somehow keeps people thinking that they're safe if they believe one way versus another, and their way is the right way. And what drives hate is fear. And again, it's just so unbelievably sad. I've worked with all different walks of life, all different faiths, all different religions. And being a therapist, I have to be neutral. That's my job. But it's also really interesting to learn. Like, I love learning. I've learned lots about the Muslim faith. I've learned lots about various different dialects of Christianity and Judaism. You know, I've learned lots about different walks of life. The ones that use their faith to abuse, mistreat, and justify bad behavior, that's not the faith. That's the people behind the faith. That's the evil behind the faith that is using it so they can, because they are mentally not stable or well. But, you know, honestly, most dialects of Christianity, no matter what it is, preaches sort of the same fundamental rule, and that is love thy neighbor. Jesus walked the earth. He was a good man. He proved to be a real person. And he was one spreading good, humble, gracious, selfless love. That's teaching humanity to be kind. So why do we have hate wrapped up into certain dialects of faith and this extremism and this radicalism? It's the polar, it's completely hypocritical. It's the polar opposite as to what the world is trying to be taught, the fundamentals of Jesus and Christianity in the Bible.
Well, because it's love thy neighbor. Well, it's because it's love thy neighbor as thyself, unless thy neighbor is different than thyself. Then try to change thy neighbor to be more like thyself. And if you cannot, you hate them.
See, that's the
Like,
problem.
what
See,
has
that's
become.
it's that extreme. It's not about that. Again, people can believe different things, and you are not right over another person, and that's your own limiting belief, and it's ignorance.
Mhm.
So again, a lot of people are, this is a very touchy subject when it comes to religion and when it comes to
Very touchy,
abortion
yeah.
and when it comes to gun laws. Oh my God, you are going to have so many people coming out of the gates disagreeing with you. Again, it's being open to another person's perspective. You have the choice to believe whatever you like, but when you certainly say to somebody, nope, I'm right and you're wrong, you are always going to run into problems,
The
right?
interesting thing that you brought up about being a therapist, being a
Mhm.
psychologist, being a clinician, I think you have to, obviously, whatever profession you go into, you have to have certain traits, and that's what sends you to that profession, if you will. But
Yeah.
in psychology, in therapy in general, you learn, or else you're not very effective, to
No, you have to.
listen, to listen. So in listening, we're hearing different, oh, well, that might be the reason, and that might be the reason. And our job isn't to change people, like, you need to do this or that, but it's like, it's like to educate people. Do you see how this thinking might be placing you into where you're at? I mean, there's a lot of different things that go on in psychology, but we're kind of to point out and to listen. And listening is a huge beneficial trait.
Yes, the biggest thing is, as therapists, we're taught to actively listen. Part of actually the biggest part of being a therapist is it's not the talking.
The
It's the
listening.
watching of the body language. It's watching how they're moving. It's active listening and actually watching body language is more a part of effective communication than actual talking is, believe it or
Because
not.
it's not always what they
It's
say.
just what they say. No, it isn't. It
It's
isn't.
how it's
So
said.
it's
It's
how it's said. It's all of these things play a role. But the biggest fundamental part is when it comes to resolving any kind of conflict is validation of another person's thoughts, feelings, and opinions, whether you agree with them or not. It is being able to absolutely look at that person, hear that person, see that person in an objective manner. So this is where humanity runs into problems, is that when people have this black and white thinking that their way is the highway, you're always going to run into conflict.
And when we're listening and looking and all that in an objective manner, we're trying to also then get that person to see, perhaps, maybe, relook at this. Is there another way to look at this? Is this something that is causing you distress? And it's not why are you thinking this way, but it's looking at how these thought processes and patterns developed.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then, is there a way to change that? Is there a different way to look at this? Is there something that you're missing? Is there
Well,
something
that's
you're ignoring? You
yeah,
know,
pointing out what they can't see, which is obviously the lack
right?
of self-awareness, right? If we all learn cognitive behavioral therapy at young ages, we would all be very self-aware and we'd be able to help ourselves. But we're
Yeah.
not taught that in school, unfortunately. We're taught stupid shit that's not really applicable.
like
That's
calculus.
mapping. You can totally disagree with me on that. We need cognitive function for sure. Math is important, but really emotional regulation and learning and self-awareness is really important. So when it comes to this, though, what's interesting is when you look at these this fundamental hate. Now, I know in the beginning we said at this podcast or in this podcast that hate is a learned behavior. It's not a mental illness. But Jody, can you confirm or can you help our viewers understand that there very much can be mental illness associated
Oh,
with people that are dictators. And usually there's personality deficits up the wazoo when
okay.
it comes to.
This is where I don't. There is a different schools of thought on whether personality disorders are mental illness versus
I know.
disorder. So I don't think it's an illness in the sense of illnesses to me signify something that can be cured or go into remission,
Yes.
what have you. Whereas a disorder is, I mean, you can potentially manage it, but it's always there. It's part of you. So
well, it's a characteristic.
So somebody who is
Personality
NPD or BPD or ASPD or delusional thinking, oh my God, delusional disorder.
It's
Delusional disorder is
impossible.
fixed. It is fixed. It cannot be
Changed.
I have not met anybody who has ever been able to or have said it can be changed. So that those things, so it's more mental to me, health disorders, and somebody with a mental health disorder, if I don't know if they would call it hate though.
But if you look at, I'm just going to say, because we're talking about radical hate here, right? With what's going on in the world today with Hamas. And then if you look at people like Hitler and you look at Saddam Hussein and you look at histories,
Osama bin Laden. Yeah.
Osama bin Laden, if you look at histories, dictators, even, I'm going to say it, and I'm sorry to all of you that are Trump lovers, but that guy's got classic NPD. If any psychologist, and I'm not a doctor, I'm a therapist, but man, anybody who works in mental health can see that that guy is classic narcissistic personality disorder with sociopathic traits.
He's got cluster B traits. He's histrionic.
No, he's a cluster B milkshake, that guy. He's like all over the place. Yeah. So, but again, so a lot of dictators, a lot of authority figures, a lot of influencers, a lot of people who are who have a lot of power.
Cult leaders
are brutal.
like that. Yeah.
These are people who have usually, okay, so their pathology is usually personality disorder. Does that make them mentally ill? Like Jody said, there's different schools of thought on this. A lot of people think that personality disorders aren't mental illnesses, but there's a lot of people old school that do. And they also usually have other mental health issues that go along with them. They don't stand alone. So you don't often see a personality disorder without anxiety or depression or other comorbid issues, right? It's very rare. Or there's people that just have traits. But this level of hate, Jody, I wanted to ask you, what would your perspective be on this? There's got to be psychopathy there. There has to be ASPD characteristics when they're wanting to kill and harm people.
Well, it's so hard because I'm not a sociologist. And I think that, what is it that somebody called it? Not the mob mentality, bystander. They said something about like bystander syndrome or something like that. It was the first time I heard it, where you're just this bystander, but you're getting involved in something that you have no idea on. And it's contagious, just like mob mentality is contagious. And I think that and this is a good probably direction to end this chapter on, because I can guarantee you there's going to be more discussion on this if Bree is willing to be my co-host some more.
Yes, of course. Absolutely. This is fascinating.
Put it in the comments. Yes, we want Bree. We want Bree. Even if you're not doing that, we're going to have her back. But anyway,
I won't be offended. Don't worry.
This is, more, but with the advent of social media, I think that with what's happened in, I'm just going to say the past 7 years, 2015, 8 years, almost 9 years now, there are going to be changes in the field of psychology, because the stuff that's going on right now, it's something, but it's not necessarily diagnosable in the DSM. I think it's a lot of sociological factors, but a lot of what is trendy, what is on social media. I am getting fed by social media. I am getting my beliefs from social media. And we've become this, we're going with the crowd. And I don't know how many of these people honestly truly know what they believe in.
Well, that mob mentality that you're talking about, it's almost like blind
faith,
blind faith, but blind brainwashing. They're being brainwashed and they're kind of blind. Like if you look at all the Nazis, how does a whole group of people hate another group of people that much? They weren't born. Were they all born psychopaths? No. But Hitler was a psychopath. Like he had that pathology. Like you've got to, like, if they've done tons of research on it. So when you're looking at this radical hate that I'm talking about with Hamas, do you think as a psychologist that there has to be that element there? Because when we say that hate is not a mental illness, there has to be something going on with their brain chemistry. We know that psychopaths have different brain chemistry than the rest of the world, right?
Yeah, that's you said what I was just going to say. There's no way your brain, when one of the things that we do in therapy, well, cognitive behavioral therapy, is your neurons, we have neuroplasticity. Our brains
are malleable.
Yeah. And we're forming new neural pathways. Now, we don't get bigger brains or anything like that. We have 100 billion neurons, but they're just changing the way we think and feel changes those neurons. I know with mass murderers, with serial killers and psychopaths, they have done MRIs but they've already committed the crimes, and they've done MRIs, and they see that there is an area in the brain by the amygdala that does not
doesn't fuck. No, it doesn't. Yeah.
But you can't take every single baby and do MRIs, and then so it's like a chicken or egg. Did it happen because of?
Yeah.
Or did that cause it? So if we took everybody and looked at their brain chemistry, and here's the thing that you can't, if we look at their brain chemistry 10 years ago and all of these people today, we look at their brain chemistry, if it's different, the thing is, were they born that way, or did their thought process change it? So that's
again,
psychology is a biopsychosocial.
It is biopsychosocial. That's what I was going to say. Genetic, biopsychosocial, and then obviously like the environment, right? So all these things play into how a person's going to grow. If you look at
psychologically, sociologically, and right now, sociologically is playing a huge factor.
Yeah, that's right. So from an anthropology and then sociology are two aspects of studying cultures and how societies work in different varying cultures. So it would be interesting how much of that is the influence versus, looking at some of the mass dictators in the world that have run like for thousands and thousands from the beginning of time, how much of this is sort of a predisposition of, born versus environment, nature versus nurture.
Because here's another thing that makes it difficult. We don't have blood tests, x-rays, MRIs, and all of that to make a diagnosis. So until, like, if you went back in time and there was some way that they could exhume the brain, and they can't, but I'm just making this up, and they did MRIs on every single horrible dictator, Caligula, Vlad the Impaler, if they're the same person, excuse me, and let's say every single one of those had some kind of similar defect. Again, were they born with this? We don't know. So what I tell people too is, like, if you think about you have a family history of cancer. That's why they take your medical history. That does not necessarily mean you will get cancer, but if all the factors are correct, it's highly likely. My husband had prostate cancer. He was the baby of the family. His two older brothers didn't get it, but if you have two relatives that have it, you have a 97% chance of getting it. How come he got it and the other two didn't? Variety of factors. So,
well,
go on.
The epidemiological studies around all of these types of things you're going to get. And when they even say with personality disorders, 50% is genetic, and then 50% but in that large group of people, there's going to be a person that's got 90% genetic predisposition versus 10% environmental. So again, it's not a one size fits all. It's really hard to determine. But if you look at the congruent behavior of these mass dictators that spew so much hate, they can actually go out and kill, and how much of it is cultural, right? Like if you look at cultural differences and you look at the Middle East versus North American culture, I think it was years ago, back in the 80s, my uncle worked at it was like a mill plant or some sort of, it was a mill. It was like a wood mill. And this East Indian gentleman, I guess something was said to him and it was offensive. And in his country, he legally had the right to kill the person. So he went after the guy with a hook. And I mean, I don't know if that's changed. We're talking back in the early 80s. So this was quite a while ago now. But again, how much of it is I'm going to go kill people because in my culture, we have the right to do that. Versus I'm actually a psychopath and I get off on hurting people or I get off on killing people.
Yeah, that's different.
Wiping out an ethnic group, right?
I'm trying to think, what is that island where don't go, they will kill you. Like if you are anywhere near there, they're a tribe. No one has been around them. People yelling.
I know the one you're talking about, but I don't remember the name of it. Right. So again, that's more anthropology and sociology because they look at those things as to how much that plays into the way a person.
Because here's the thing. They apparently don't sit and kill each other.
No.
But if an outsider comes, the first thing they will do is start shooting at you. Now, are they shooting at you to leave us alone? Or because we hate outsiders? We don't know this.
Because we fear outsiders. We don't know them. This is what it stems from. So it's fear.
So you know, all of those. It's such a hard, and we'll discuss this more because I think it's fascinating on that mob mentality and why some people are attracted to that and other people are not affected at all. Is that, again, it's biopsychosocial. So is it your environment, your growing up in an understanding, caring, non-hateful family or whatever that is accepting?
Yeah.
Because we can dislike.
Yeah. Hate's different though. Yeah.
Hate is a
different.
very strong, and to me,
it is
wasted emotion.
It is. It is because it's all based on fear and ignorance.
Right.
There's no need to hate anybody.
And isn't there a word, xenophobia? You fear what we don't know, pretty much.
We fear what we don't. And
and the sad and scary thing is, like, when you think of Muslims and how there's Islamophobia and, oh my God, they're Muslim. You know, I worked with a girl who was from Indonesia. I had no idea they were Muslim. That didn't fit what I had thought. I thought Muslim was Middle Eastern. So when people also talk about Muslim, they forget, just like Jewish people, they forget anybody. I have my husband's last name. My husband was not Jewish. So you can't also pick on the name and stuff. So when you're picking a group, that's why I will say, if I don't like you, there's a reason. But it doesn't mean I hate you. I don't want to spend that time on you. So where does this, like you said, where does that seed of hate start to, because
grow?
Is it planted in everybody? I used to think that we were born a blank slate with a tendency, whatever. God, what is wrong with me? I'm
propendency.
For good. When you look at little babies, unless you have a birth defect of a miswiring that turns you into ASPD, or ASPD starts before the age of 15, unless there's something like that. And we've seen 2-year-olds that wanted to kill their pets and things like that. So it does start early when you see it. But when you have oh my God, my brain just shut off. What was I saying?
I don't know. Predisposition. You're talking about, you're seeing all these behaviors versus social, or versus this fear and this growing of hate.
So, like, okay, you guys, I apologize. Okay. So if we're born a blank slate, do we have a seed of good and a seed of bad? And it depends on which is watered.
Yeah, exactly.
When I was growing up, and going through school and stuff, I always said, we are a blank slate with we're headed on the good track.
Yeah, that's what I've always believed, that we're inherently born good, but that's not always the case, right? Because if you look at the data now showing with psychopathy, it's a bit different.
And so now I wonder, and with everything that we're seeing,
it's an extreme level of fear, because honestly, again, the extreme hate has to come from extreme fear. Somehow the opposing faith, somehow Judaism is a threat to Hamas and his realm of people. And again, I know in Canada, because we're such a multicultural country, I mean, I have lots of friends who are Islamic, and I know the Quran. I know that form of faith. I know Muslim faith quite well. I've read it. People who are true Muslim are nothing like what this guy's dictating and teaching. It is the polar opposite. It's a balance of everything. If the behavior is done that is not good in the eyes of people who are Muslim, there has to be something to balance out that not good deed, so to speak. And again, it's not what people think it would be, and it's not radical. And I know many practicing Muslims that don't wear a hijab and don't have to be covered up. And I have Arabic clients that live in Western Saudi Arabia that they dress like normal, regular women, and they're very beautiful, and they're very, right? Iran used to be the same way until their dictator and their leader took over. It's not what people really, you're looking at the extremisms, right? And again, of men wanting to dictate and be powerful, because it has nothing to do with the Muslim faith. That is people and their own issues.
And I'm going to end it on this.
Yeah.
If anybody knows of a woman, and I'm sure there probably were, but a woman who was so god awful, women, but I don't even know of a woman who was a Hitler, a Caligula, all of these, if you go back in time, there's got to be a woman somewhere. But what does that tell you?
Yeah.
Testosterone?
Yeah. So this is, again, if you look at, Jody would know this as well, most serial killers are men. There's women out there, but it's few and far between. There is some sort of biological, genetic, or and gender difference there with testosterone, angry. That's how they get their stuff out. Whereas women are more, subdued, and we're more emotional, and we're not as angry. If you look at sociological predispositions to suicide, men are more likely to commit suicide. Women will act on suicide more, and it's less violent. Men will always take a violent way out. Women don't. That's been around for a long time, right? That there is a gender component there. There's a biological difference as to why that happens.
Yes. So if you can, in the comments, come up with one, please.
Let us know if you guys want to continue to talk about this, or if there's a topic based off what Jody and I've talked about today that you want to hear. Please let us know, because we'd love to continue this. This is really some really interesting stuff. But let's just love one another. At the end of the day, let's just love one another. Love all people, right? Love all people. And to anybody out there who is from the Jewish faith and practices Judaism, my heart really goes out to you. And I'm so sorry that you're having to go through this. It is so wrong in our day and age, and it's not okay. It's not okay. And I stand with you and I validate you, and I'm sorry.
And that makes me want to cry. And you can dislike a government, but that doesn't mean that people are the government. Like, if you don't like the American government, the United States government, does that mean you hate me? Is it fine to hate me? So if you don't like what the government is doing in Israel, that's the government. That's not the everyday person. Yeah. So that's another thing. And if you, again, look at it, if you're trying to look at it from a humanitarian perspective, think about this. Everybody, rightly so, and again, I say everybody lightly because I don't like to use absolutes, but was up in arms about women in Iran being taken off the streets and killed because they did not cover their hair. Those same people are the ones funding and supporting and pushing and making up Hamas.
I know. It's the radicalism.
You can feel for the Palestinians, not the complicit ones that are hiding hostages and stuff like that. But if your compassion does not cover all of the people, then you're not a humanitarian. Because the government is not the individual.
No, that's right.
So I hate to hear, myself included, that people are afraid of being who they are, whether it's gay, straight, trans, black, white, purple, whatever. Because what is it? Love is love. People are people. Brown eggs, white eggs, they're the same inside. We're all people.
It's as simple as that. We just need to dumb it down a little bit. Yeah. Love thy neighbor, right? For the most part, we don't associate with, really like serial killers or people that like to molest children. So just look at it from the perspective that just love people, right? People are people. If you don't
love people, just be kind.
Just be kind.
Nice. Yeah. And if you can't be kind and nice, be civil. Be civil. I would have my inmates. I would tell them, I guarantee you get up in the morning and go out on the yard and say good morning. Say good morning. I bet you'll get it back. And they were surprised that out of like 10 people, 8 of them would be like, whoa, good morning.
Yeah.
Good morning.
Happiness is infectious. It really is, but you have to try. And here's the deal. If you were that miserable person, you don't like people, maybe ask yourself why.
Why? Yep.
There's got to be a reason, right? So this is great, Jody. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you. And we will continue this. So click the button, the little bell on the top. That'll notify you every time we drop an episode. Like, subscribe, share, all of that, because we appreciate you greatly and would love to hear again. And I shouldn't have to say this, but I'm going to say this: polite, civil comments. If you want to get your point across, being mean and rude and nasty, honestly, it doesn't get your point across. It just proves our point.
Well, we also are therapists, so we know why you're doing it, because you're just projecting. So nice try. 100%. We can see right through you. So you're not going to get away with anything. Just so you know.
If you want, honestly, if you want to have civil discourse on this, that would be fine.
Mhm.
But also know your stuff. Please don't use Wikipedia as your reference.
Yeah,
Please.
know
Please
your
don't.
arguments for sure.
No.
On
And
that note, my love,
if
happy
there's any
Hanukkah.
other topics, if there's any wine suggestions, drink suggestions, whatever, she should spike her coffee with suggestions.
Yeah, sorry. Just need to get rid of my frog voice.
And you can email wcwycw1@gmail.com or comments in the comments. And thank you all so much. And we will see you
Thank you. Okay, take care, everyone. Bye.